There we go. Decent brownie. He hit my dropper. Got a size 16 Jack Daniels on. Real nice fish. Good looking fish. Beautiful brown. Thank you there, Mr. Brown. Thank you, buddy. Good looking fish. So you can see this really nice deep pocket. It's very shallow. We haven't had a lot of, I'm in central Pennsylvania right now. Haven't had a lot of rain. Just really picking my spots, but this is a really great stretch, and there's a little bit of depth right here. And I had made maybe 4 or 5 casts, and even though I caught it kind of in the middle on the back edge of that deeper hole, each cast I kept tucking it and tucking it and tucking it more to drive my bugs down. There's a lot of downstream wind, and it was really my ability to cast and drive those bugs down is what helped me catch that fish. And really what I want to talk about today is just all the myths that are associated with Euro nymphing and all these misconceptions that are out there. There's a number of them, and I'm going to try to hit what I think are the most important. And the first thing that I want to talk about that is such a common myth, and I really think all these myths really just lead to bad habits, and they really keep you from elevating your Euro game. And the first myth is there's no casting in Euro nymphing. And if you've watched my videos before, I talk a lot about casting, and it really is that thing that will bring you from good to great. And I say this all the time to people: if you only had one thing to work on, it would be your casting, because I watch a lot of guys, and the guys that struggle, or you know, every now and then you might have a really good day and then they'll go back to the same piece of water and struggle the next day. And it's typically because they're lobbers, but sometimes all the stars align and you end up having a good day. But if you want to get better, become a caster and forget about that myth that it's nothing but lobbing or it's nothing but a flick, because every time I hear that, I just want to scream, because it's not a lob and it's not a flick. It is casting, and it's equally as important as throwing a traditional fly line. If you're a caster, you will become a better Euro nympher. Another fish, same hole. Look how many casts I'd made, and I'll tell you about this fish. Got him on the Jack Daniels again, and that was all about casting right there. What I did, I was standing below here a minute ago making upstream casts, driving my bugs down, and I really felt, boy, he's the brother of that last fish. He's a twin. He might be a little bit bigger. Jack Daniels. Thank you there, buddy. Thank you there, Mr. Brown. So what I did here is, this is just a good looking hole, and you can see there's just a lot of depth there. And so I was standing below there and I was driving my bugs down. I caught that one, and I just came around here and I figured if I got sideways to it, I could drive it down in the head and get vertical right away and just show them a different drift, and, you know, really access more of the bottom there than it was right here. And even though that fish hit the dropper, he was up, I just got a better drift and I was able to get vertical in there, and I was able to bang that fish. And once again, that was all about casting. And I've talked about this before. If I just lobbed it, my bugs, that's just such a short window here. That is maybe an 8-foot hole, and it's probably smaller than that. And the reason casting was so important here, especially the tuck cast, is if I was a lobber or if I was a flicker, my bugs would have never got down, because it would have taken at least 5 feet of maybe an 8-foot window to start accessing the bottom. And I caught that fish here. And honestly, if you're a lobber, you might not even be able to fish that hole. I was on an Instagram live with Derek Kirkpatrick and Tori Collins. They're guys up in the Farmington River, and I was talking to them, and Derek Kirkpatrick, he actually said something that I completely agree. He said, when people are poor casters, they take half of the drift to make up for a mistake. Meaning, making a bad cast, a lob, a flick, and then they're pulling in the slack to try to get tight to it. And what they've done is they've missed a lot of great water. So usually if you know slower runs, you can make a bad cast, take half of the drift to get tight, and you usually catch your fish in front of you or just below you, but you really struggle up here. So you need to dispel that myth of there's no casting in EURO nymphing, because there's a lot of casting. And if you accept that there's casting, it is going to bring you from here to here. I heard George Daniels talk. You know, Joe Humphreys, he's famously once said the difference between a good nympher and a great nympher is usually one split shot. I heard George Daniels speak, and he modernized that term. And he said the difference between a good EURO nympher and a great EURO nympher is casting. So if George says it, I would take that to heart. Now I'm going to talk about casting a while, because it's kind of like casting A, B, C, D, because there's a lot of other myths that go along with casting that really inhibit people. So as I work my way up the stream, I'll talk to you about them. You know, it's really clear conditions, and that's another thing that really inhibits lobbers, is they can't fish at distance, and they tend to fish with a fixed amount of, line, and typically under the rod tip, and because of that they have to get really close to the area they're fishing. So when you're fishing crystal clear water like it is today, you're just going to struggle. Sometimes the conditions allow you to do that, but when you have conditions like this, it's pretty tough. I love spots like that. I love spots like that. Even though this is a little guy, he hit just before it plunged down there, and those are spots that people are going to lift their bugs up 99% of the time. They're just not gonna, you're not gonna finish that drift. He hit the Jack Daniels again, little guy. Well, you can always learn from every fish you catch, even the small ones. You know, if you're out there and you're catching small ones and they're wild trout, that's a good thing, right? Because for every small one you catch, it always leads you to a bigger one, because, you know, even the small ones, you know, an 8-inch fish has been in the river for a while. So, boy, there's a nice riser ahead of me. So you can see it dumps off right there. It picks up a lot of speed, but fish love to hug right in front of that, because where it rolls over right there just before that, there's a cushion of soft water. So just fish the drift out, and if it goes over, it goes over. It's not a big deal, but just keep tight to your bug, stay in contact, and fish it right to the end, because a lot of times you're going to be rewarded. There we go. It's a little guy, Jack Daniels. Just, I will tell you about this fish here, how I got that. So, I'm making upstream casts. Thank you there, little buddy. I'm making upstream casts. Now, I'm drifting, so I caught that fish up there. It's got this nice deep slot. And what I did is, after I made my drift, I'll show you here. I'll just give you an example. I cast, I'm fishing it out. This is a really good drift. So I'm fishing it out. And right here, I slowly pull it out. I take it in front of me. I square my shoulders to the target. I'm making false casts. And I'm right back there in the zone. And I made a really nice cast there. So a couple things that I did there that I'm going to dispel some myths and break you out of these habits. So one of the biggest myths that has to do with casting, and this goes back to an old school check nymphing style. It's, you need to set the hook at the back of your drift and just fire it upstream. So an old school check nympher does this. They put it upstream. At the end of the drift, they set the hook and turn and fire it back upstream. And that is such a bad habit to get into because it creates a poor casting style. First of all, you don't need to set the hook at the end of every cast, because there are plenty of times when you're EURO nymphing that, yes, at the end of the drift, you'll all of a sudden have a fish on, but if you just start to, at the end of the drift, if you just start to slowly pull it out of the water, if there's a fish on, you're gonna feel it, and then you're just gonna set the hook. But you don't need to yank it out of the water and turn and fire it upstream, because two things it does. One, you normally don't even know where you're casting. You're just blindly throwing it upstream or flipping it upstream. And two, it's highly inaccurate. So what I did before that fish, before I made that cast, is I fished my drift out. I swung it in front of me. I turned my shoulders. I squared them to the target, made false cast, and fired it right into the zone where I wanted it. And that's what you need to do. Break that habit, that myth of setting the hook and turning and flipping it out, because people say, oh, you set the hook, which equals your back cast, and turn and flick it upstream. But my shoulders are facing this way. And what's gonna happen is since my shoulders are facing this way, you usually just flip it across your body, and it's not gonna go where you're looking. It's just gonna go across your body. It's gonna fall way right. So get out of that habit, break that myth. It's an old school style, and people that say that really are lobbers and flickers. They're not casters, which leads me to another myth, that people say that EURO nymphing is not a very pretty cast. It's not artful, it's not elegant. There's no false casting, there's no haul. And you can see I'm making plenty of false casts, and I'm doing a short haul, and boom, I turn that leader right over. This is a Microliter, and you can actually have leader turnover if you use proper fundamentals of casting. So break that myth of it's a lob, it's a flick. And learn to be a caster. And there's a fish, a pretty decent one too. Pretty decent fish. Boy, this is just a really nice run. I believe he hit the Jack Daniels again on the dropper. I'm liking that Jack Daniels today. Into the net. Nice fish. Nice fish. This is well, he's almost 16. Jack Daniels. Good looking brownie. Good looking brownie. Thank you there, Mr. Brown. There's a fish. Nice one. Nice one on the Jack Daniels again. Boy, that was awesome. Just a little cider twitch. Nice jumping brownie. Nice jumping brownie. Yeah. Thank you there, Mr. Brown. Nice chunk right there. So the next myth that I want to talk about is your flies that you use and everything that goes along with those. So that particular fish, there's a rock there and a rock there, and there's a nice deep trough. You can just see that really limestone green water. So my bugs were going along, and I just saw my cider twitch, and I had that fish. So there's a big myth about feeling your strikes, rod being sensitive. Sensitivity, and I've said this before, sensitivity in the rod is overrated. This rod is not built. It's a side benefit that you do feel everything, but this rod was not built to feel the fish hit. This rod was built to cast weighted nymphs. The sensitivity in this rod is how you feel connected to the bugs at the end of your tippet. That's where sensitivity is key. Just feeling connected. And I fished Euro rods, and it's Euro rods in air quote, because just because you put Euro rod on a long rod doesn't really mean it's a great Euro rod. And I fished rods where I have felt completely unconnected from my bugs. So sensitivity is overrated. It has nothing to do with feeling your strikes. You need to move from feeling to seeing the strikes, which leads me to another myth that this is fairly, that's a deep run, and deep is relative, but this is actually deep for this particular area I'm fishing. And my bugs never ticked the bottom, but yet I knew I was accessing the bottom because I could tell my cider was going slightly slower than the surface current. And I hear that all the time. People are saying you have to feel your bugs bouncing along the bottom. That's a myth. It is not true. If your bugs are bouncing along the bottom, that means you have too much weight on. And there are times that I've fished, I don't know, I started this probably 50 yards downstream, and I mean, have I felt my bugs hit the bottom? Yes, but literally I could count on one hand how many times I've actually felt my bugs hitting the bottom. Just learn to read that cider. It's vitally important that you move from feeling to seeing, and don't worry about your bugs ticking along the bottom. Just worry about having that slight cider slow down and have it go slightly slower than the surface current. When you do that, you have the perfect amount of weight on. I really don't like that term anchor fly, because to me, an anchor fly sounds like something that's super, super heavy. And that's another myth that I hear people talking about, which is the anchor fly is a sacrificial fly. It's a fly that's got to be bounced along the bottom, and because of that, you lose a lot of flies. I lose way more flies in the trees than I do on the stream bottom. So it's not a sacrificial fly, and it's not an anchor fly. There are times, yesterday I was fishing at a single 2.3 bead, and to me that's not an anchor, but it was the perfect amount of weight for the water that I was fishing. And if you look at my fly box, I have far more lighter flies. To me, A heavy fly is a 3.3 millimeter bead. To me, that's heavy. And that's actually what I have on right now, because there's a fish right there. Nice fish again on the Jack Daniels. There's a lot of wind blowing downstream. Nice fish. There's a lot of wind blowing downstream, and boy, this is a heck of a nice fish. And I have to compensate with the heavier bug. So my box is, I have tons of 2 3s, 2 5s, 2 8s, and 3 0s. Most of my box is that. And then I have 3 3s. And then I have a few 3 8s and 4 0s on a mop fly when I really need some weight. But most of my flies are not anchor flies. This is or in the sense of being a big old lead weight to get it down to the bottom. This is a heck of a nice fish. Look at that fatty. Thank you there, Mr. Brown. Appreciate it. There's a good fish. Just, once again, tucking it in there. Just had a really nice drift. Just saw that cider twitch. He hit the waltz on the bottom. Size 14. Nice chunk. Thank you there, Mr. Brown. Appreciate it, buddy. So you can see this nice deep hole right here. Just made a nice upstream tuck cast. Just started lifting my rod, stayed in head of my cider. Just saw that cider twitch. You know, that's one thing that I'll talk about too, that is a bit of a myth, that the term high sticking is associated with Euro nymphing. And I just think you need to get out of that habit. You don't need to be holding your rod high and your arms stretched out. I mean, you can see that, you know, if you're out there all day, that's really tiring. And you just need to be fishing in a comfortable position. Right here. This is what I was doing. Just in a comfortable position. My rod just feels light in hand. And I'm actually elevating my rod tip. I'm not going like that. Now, there are times when you're trying to reach over a seam or a heavy water or something like that, that you can high stick. But day in and day out, 90% of the fishing is arm in a comfortable place. So get out of that habit and drop that myth of high sticking. It's just not necessary. Fish with your arm in a comfortable position, which is typically bent, tucked into your side, and your hand just right in front of the middle part of your chest. That's comfortable. There's a fish. Look at that. Just once again, water that I think people would not fish. Really juicy over here. People would fish this and start walking upstream. I just brought this right straight back to me and got this really, really solid 14-inch brownie. He hit the waltz. Just a nice chunk fish. Nice chunk. Thank you there, buddy. Thank you, Mr. Brown. He's been caught before. Bottom lip ripped off. Super pet peeve of mine. Pinch those barbs, people, or use barbless hooks. As a sidebar, that's another myth too, but that barbless hooks, you lose a lot of fish. I will take the opposite side of that argument all day long. I think you actually catch more. The hooks today are so good. Those barbless hooks, the points are really long, super sharp. And you don't lose fish. Hooks don't, when you're tight to your fish, hooks don't work the way backwards. If you stay tight, you're gonna keep the fish pinned. The jumps, stay tight. When you lose fish is when you give them slack. A barbed hook is not gonna keep them pinned. You keep them pinned. These fish are way too important to be ripping their lips off. So I was standing right here, and this fish was right here. Just kind of a nondescript spot. But you can see this is just all these big grooves, and boy, this looks really juicy ahead of me. There we go. Boy, this microliter, you talk about sensitivity. That's what's sensitive. Boy, that is a brook trout, and that is gigantic. That is an awesome brook trout. Holy smokes. This stream gives up some brookies, but I have never got one this big. Boy, what a beautiful, beautiful chunk of a brookie. Look at this guy. Look at that beautiful brookie. Man, that was awesome. So I was talking about this microliter and the sensitivity, and I will take a moment. I've done a video on a microliter, and if you haven't seen it, I hope you check it out. There's a lot of myths associated with a microliter, and the biggest one is that it is so incredibly difficult to cast, and that is so far from the truth. I actually think it's much easier to cast. These rods, this is a Thomas & Thomas Contact 2. This is a 10-foot 9-inch 2-weight. This rod was built to cast weighted nymphs. And if you think about it for a moment, it wasn't built to cast fly line. A side benefit is that it can cast fly line. But it was built to cast weighted nymphs because that's what's loads your rods. So the thinner you go, the actually easier it is to cast, and the farther you can cast. When you start making your leader heavier and heavier and heavier, it actually becomes more difficult to cast. You don't need a tapered leader. That's also another myth. This is straight 4X to a 5X sighter. That's all it is. If you wanted to, you could go straight sighter material all the way to your tippet ring. And trust me, if you have a high quality Euro nymph, even the mid-price range rods are still great casting rods. They're built for this stuff. But the heavier you go with a leader, the more disconnected you feel, the less sensitivity you have, meaning you just don't feel connected to your bugs. So really get rid of all those myths associated with a microliter, and don't feel like it's this massively difficult thing to cast, because it's not. And I'm always surprised how many people talk about the difficulties in it, and I think that scares a lot of people away, quite frankly. But if you have a solid foundation and fundamentals of casting, you can cast a microliter easily all day long. So if you move to that microliter, you're not only going to be able to cast farther, but you're just going to feel so much more connected to your bugs. And just like that beautiful brookie I just caught, that I just felt so connected. And then I just saw this little slight sighter movement. He was right in there, and boom, got rewarded with that beauty. You know, I've been a student of Euro nymphing for a long time. I'm just really, really passionate about it. And you know, my dad really gave me the foundation in Euro nymphing. I started out as a kid. Oh, that was a nice fish. Lost that fish and went to the side, and thought I'd fire up a cigar. So what I was, nice fish. So what I was saying about my dad is he really, when I was a kid, he taught me the fundamentals of EURO nymphing. And it really set me up for just becoming super passionate about it. Let me get this guy in. He hit the wall. Thank you there, Mr. Brown. Thank you there, buddy. It's a beautiful riffle here. So what I was saying is my dad, he really taught me as a boy how to EURO nymph, but I learned with worms. I used a fly rod, 2-pound test monofilament, and night crawlers. And if I needed more, and it was the weight of the night crawlers, he taught me how to cast. If the weight of the night crawler wasn't good enough to get it down, I would add split shot. And that just kind of morphed into replacing night crawlers with nymphs. And then I just evolved over time as the equipment got better, as materials like leader materials, as they got better. I just simply evolved with time. And my dad would always joke, you know, I changed my leader, and my dad would always joke, well, what do you want to do, catch 5 more fish? And I was always like, yeah, I do, you know. So I was just very passionate about it. And this is not really a myth. It's just more of a kind of a sidebar, or maybe it's just a commentary. There's always these age-old questions like, what type of leader should I use? And once that question's posted, you'll get 100 different answers. And that it's all opinion, right? And it's based on everybody's experience. I'll tell you, there are no absolutes in this. There's no absolutes in anything, but certainly not this. But I'll see people, they'll say, well, all you need is 12-pound test maxima. Or they'll say, all you need to taper 20, 15, 12, the old mono rig. Or you just need 8-pound. And you see, or you don't need a EURO fly line, right? It's all based on their opinion. And when I see people comment like that, to me, that just kind of tells me they just leveled out. They're not going to move from here to here because they're kind of unwilling to change. I've tried every leader system out there. I've tried with a EURO line, without a EURO line. And that's where I would suggest that the only way you're going to get better is if you try. And you got to give it the old college try. You can't just try it for a day and say, this isn't working for me, right? You've got to have a solid foundation and fundamentals of EURO nymphing, particularly casting, line management, weight management. And when you get really proficient at that, that's when you start changing and you start thinning out that leader. You know, the one thing I'll say about leaders again is, this is kind of my approach and the way I look at it. You can look at guys like George Daniel or Devin Olson, Lance Egan, or I follow a lot of these Spanish nymphers and French nymphers. They're the very best fishermen in the world. And when it comes to straight EURO nymphing or straight nymphing, they all use thin leaders. So my thought process is, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me, and certainly you. There's a reason that they're not using straight 12-pound tests or straight 8-pound tests, because they've tried it and they know there's a better way. Be open to trying new things, right? Those are the things, trying new things and discovering a new and better way. That's what takes you from here to here, from good to great. There we go. Nice fish, just right on the other side of that rock. He hit the waltz. I don't know if you saw in that cast, what I did is, I did a really great job of managing my line. It's super, super important. All right, let me take the cigar out of my mouth. Thank you there, Mr. Brown. Appreciate it, buddy. So what I did there is I made a cast right here, a nice tuck cast. I immediately got my Euro line in my hand and I started managing it to the rod. Then I got vertical and he hit just on the other side of that rock there. And that's one of the, it's not a myth. It's just, once again, it's based on everybody's opinion. And, you know, it's that question that I hear and see all the time, do I need a Euro line? And once again, I base myself using Euro line on experience and trying everything. So this is a Microliter. And I can tell you, I've tried it without a Euro line and I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is because for a number of reasons. There are far more cons than pros. And the one thing is, when your hand is wet, your leader wants to stick to your hand. When it's cold outside, you don't have the feeling that you have in the warm. It's June right now. You don't have the feeling in the winter time in your fingertips like you do this time of year. It's very difficult to feel this. And you can see when I cast, I'm right onto the Euro line. So I'm managing it right away. And it's super easy to feel this line. Especially in the wind, it starts flapping and you start grabbing around for it. It's very difficult, but this line just makes it so easy to manage it. And it's harder if you don't have it using a Microliter. And I love the feel of a fly line in my hand. So once again, it's just based on my experience and me trying everything. So don't be opposed to a Euro line and don't chalk it up to, oh, well, competition guys use it because they have to, because it's great for the recreational angler as well. Let's try to pop one between those two rocks over there. There we go. There's a fish. There we go. That's cool. That was cool. So once again, you know, don't be afraid to try things. You know, the evolution that we've had in Euro nymphing between the rods and the leader material is really second to none now. And the only way you're going to know is if you try it. So just once again, if you want to move from good to great, just be willing to try. New things, I should say. Nice brownie. Waltz eater. Thank you there, buddy. Nice chunk. And also, be willing to try casts like that. So I came out here, got into position. That's just an ideal spot for a nice brownie. Popped it up there, came right through there, and he nabbed it. So I'm going to be calling it quits here on the stretch I just fished. Boy, it was really, really good to me. I hope you enjoyed this video. You know, the whole purpose was really, I just wanted to dispel a lot of myths that are out there. I really feel like they hinder people and they really keep you from going from, you know, moving from good to great. And if you can move away from those myths, you know, have an open mind for change, just try new things, form your opinion on it, and really focus on your fundamentals, you really are gonna raise your Euro game. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I'm happy to help you out. If you liked it, I'd appreciate if you give me a thumbs up. And also, I'll leave you with this. Get out there and practice your casting. That's what's gonna make you really, really good. I'll talk to you later. Tight lines, everybody. Bye.